So I did my thing, and then he just kind of looked at me. He's like, all right, just stop. I want you to, I want you to go to that corner. I want you for the next 15 minutes, just do jabs, like just one jab at a time. I
Yeah.
don't want to see like your form's all wrong. Everything's just messed up. Like we're going to start you from scratch. I thought I was good. Apparently not. So definitely, if nothing else, martial arts teaches you humility.
Abs- Absolutely. That's hilarious. My guest today is David Lin. David is a financial journalist, and I've been following his work for quite some time now. He used to work for Kitco News. That's where I caught wind of him. And recently, he just started a new podcast and a new YouTube channel called the David Lin Report. I highly suggest if you haven't checked out his work already to do so. We'll put a link in the description below for you guys all to check out his interviews. He actually interviews some of the biggest names in the world of finance, whether it's an investment manager or a CEO. His most recent guest was the CEO of Redfin. So he does a tremendous job. Again, I've been a big fan of his, and I was delighted to have him on the podcast. We talked about finance, of course, his journey leaving his corporate position to starting his new media company. And I was happy to find out that he actually trains martial arts as well. So it kind of fit in perfectly with the theme of our podcast, Fighting in Finance. He does Muay Thai, some Kung Fu, and we had some good laughs. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. This episode, by the way, is brought to you by my company, Strand Life Wealth Management. We are a financial planning firm for the high and ultra high net worth community. We do investment management, tax planning, tax filing, estate planning, risk management, as well as corporate services for those of our clients who have businesses. So if you are interested in working with a new advisor, maybe getting a second opinion, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to click the link in the description to schedule a free consultation. And without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Fighting in Finance podcast with my guest, David Lin. Well, first of all, David, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Congratulations on all your success on your YouTube channel. I've been a huge fan of yours from your days at Kitco, and I've been following your journey. It's been a joy to see the growth of your channel. And I want to start there. It seems in my eyes, independent news as a whole is rapidly taking over mainstream media, mainstream news. And my hypothesis is for many reasons, but mainly I believe it's because of just all the lies and the misinformation and the disinformation that have been spewed out by mainstream news for quite some time is finally coming to light. But to now see it in the finance world is very interesting to me. So
Mhm.
what prompted you to leave Kitco and start your own independent news channel?
Well, Parsa, thank you for having me, first and foremost. You got a great podcast. So
Thank you.
very excited to be here. Um, to your point about misinformation and disinformation being spread in mainstream media, it's spread everywhere. It's on podcasts like mine as well. I'm not saying mine in particular, but small channels, big channels. There's misinformation everywhere, which is why I believe media should be as decentralized as possible. The viewer should be able to watch as many different sources to make up their own minds on watching as many different things and getting as many different perspectives as possible. So, yeah, I mean, there's part of the reason why people have been fed up watching mainstream news is partly because of that, but also partly because maybe the programming has gotten stale or redundant or repetitive, and they just want to try to something new. Why I left Kitco. Kitco was by no means a mainstream channel. It's nowhere near the size of Fox. I was one of two anchors there. Fox has a lot more than two,
Right.
for example, right? So I left mainly because I wanted to do my own thing. I saw more opportunities for myself by growing my own brand and channel, and I believe that well, I have some other business ideas beyond just media as well. So I like to explore that outside of my last job. So really, it was a way to grow my existing audience by
Mhm.
going off my own and to speak freely. The money's better when you work for yourself.
Absolutely. How has that been, by the way? I mean, obviously my wife is a journalist as well, by the way. So we've had kind of internal
Mhm,
discussions as a family of she works for NBC. It's a big,
mhm,
conglomerate, if you will. Simple salary, benefits. I've been self-employed for the past 15 years, so for me, the fear of kind of going off on my own is nowhere near as big as it is for her.
Hmm.
I'm curious from your perspective, how was that leap of faith, if you will? I mean, did
Hmm.
you have some reluctance, or were you confident in making that decision to go out on your own?
I basically did a cost benefit analysis of leaving versus staying, and so I could project staying with an employer was a relatively good job. I liked the people there. It was, I was getting paid low six figures, so it was, wasn't rich, but it was a comfortable living where I was in Canada.
Mhm,
Um, and I could project into the next 5, 10 years how much I could possibly make, and it wouldn't be a lot more.
mhm,
So the opportunity cost would be of staying would be lost income. Obviously, you wouldn't go broke if you're not fired or the company doesn't go under. So it's a safety net, kind of. When you go off on your own, you don't have that safety net anymore. So you have to evaluate: is it worth losing six figures for potentially nothing, or would you want to risk it for a lot more? And for me, it was a simple calculation of what I could be earning versus what I was earning already. So I knew how much money I was pulling in for the company. You can tally that up by adding up all the videos on YouTube that I was recording for them. You can kind of do an estimate of the sponsorship deals that these videos were pulling in. And you can just aggregate
sure.
total revenues brought in from my work. So let's call that variable X. Okay. And then you can kind of, and then you can calculate roughly how much they were spending on pulling in that revenue. So the operating expenses for the videos, my salary, the salary of the producer, the editors that they hired to help me. I mean, those guys were spread out across other reporters as well. The other reporter I mentioned, and so it was not exclusively for me. But let's just suppose for this argument, it's one to one. So then you add up all the operating costs. That's called that Y. X minus Y is a net profit. So the question I had to ask myself is, if I go off my own, could I make at least the net profit? Otherwise, it's not worth it.
Sure.
Um, and that I don't know. That ultimately I decided that with I waited until basically I came up with a definitive answer of yes, I could, before I even made the decision to go. And I made that decision based on the fact that I knew I had a big enough audience to sustain viewership, even if I left and went off on my own. And I had a good enough relationship with some of the guests I already work with to have a show at least in the beginning, and I could always just talk by myself. So that part, pulling in the revenue aspect, was kind of a known, but
Mhm.
it was less of a complete, you know, black swan than some might think. I had a pretty good estimate as to how much the business could pull in before I left, so I felt pretty confident I would not be, um, you know, bankrupt within 6 months.
Sure, sure. And how has that been? I mean, you went from kind of having as you mentioned, the producer and
Hmm.
big staff to having to do everything on your own. Now, obviously, the revenue, as you mentioned,
Hmm.
made it worthwhile, but the upfront legwork and the stresses of starting up a YouTube channel and getting
Hmm.
everything situated. How has that process been for you?
Well, at my last job, we had a small team, so it was me and a few editors and one producer that was later hired in my last year. Most of the work, the prepping and the booking and obviously the anchoring and posting the videos, pre and post production, I did myself anyway.
Oh,
The
okay.
made the only major difference, and the thing that I didn't do, was editing videos, which was time consuming, but wasn't something that I didn't know how to do. So basically, I was doing the same thing I used to do, except just working a few more hours every day, actually a lot more hours. So it wasn't a huge transition. Everything that I had to do, I already knew how to do myself. And so I just worked more hours to do it, the exact same thing I was basically already doing. And now that I'm no, December now. Yeah, we're almost January. I started in March, so about 9 months in, I'm starting to expand and hire a team. So now I have a producer and an editor helping me. But in the beginning, yeah, it was a lot of work.
Got it. I take as I mentioned, I've been a huge fan of yours
Thank you.
for quite some time. I just love the way that you conduct your interviews. I mean, getting access to some of the guests that you have is one thing, but for them to be able to, get a little bit of feedback from your end and your introspection is just fascinating to watch. So continued growth, I hope, for your channel, and I have no
Thank
doubt
you.
that you will be the goal that you mentioned of the top financial journalist in the world one day.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah.
Of
Well, it's
course.
because of people like you that are watching and supporting the channel that make a good program. So I appreciate you guys being here.
My
And
pleasure.
follow Parso. Okay, he's got a lot of MMA fighters that share their secrets.
Yeah,
Big burly
absolutely.
guys that could beat me in a fight, probably.
Yeah, speaking of fighting, so you mentioned off air that you also train martial arts, and you haven't in a couple years for obvious reasons if you're quite busy.
Yeah,
But talk to me about your journey in martial arts and how that may have helped just your life as a whole. Because I know for me
yeah.
personally, I got into martial arts very late. I got started just as a fan in my early 30s and started training when I was 33, 34. But I
Really?
know,
What do you
yeah,
train?
mostly Muay Thai. I know that you're a big fan of Muay Thai as well. I've done a little
Yes.
bit of groundwork, some jujitsu. But for me, I just came from a very athletic background. Sports were always a huge part of my life, and I would just
Okay.
like to go to the gym. But none of those sports that I did kind of taught me what martial arts has taught me, both
Right.
in terms of discipline, respect, honor, how to face fear, adversity, consequences to not taking the sport seriously.
Uh-huh.
So I'm curious from your perspective, have those same lessons transpired?
I love talking about this. This is like one of my favorite subjects because I want to do the show with you because I talk about finance all day. So this is a good change of pace.
Got it. Love
Um,
it.
also I'll give you I'll answer that question, but let me give you some context. So I'm not a professional fighter by any means. I train casually. I stopped training. Muay Thai was the last thing I trained. I stopped training mainly because I hurt my ankle. So I this is before COVID, so I had a training injury and I just sprained my ankle and I couldn't do anything for like half a year.
Mhm.
And then COVID happened and the gym shut down and then I got busy and I just never got back into it. These days I just lift weights. I haven't trained Muay Thai in well 3 years at least, so I really miss it. But I started off. The first thing I did was kickboxing. I did that when I was Well, I started when I was 13, all the way to when I was I think 16 or 17. And then in college, I went to McGill in Canada. I was looking for like extracurricular gym activities to sign up for like classes, and then they had a whole list of like Pilates and yoga and like whatever. And then there was like Shaolin Kung Fu. It was just stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm like, what the hell? Like Pilates, yoga, and then Shaolin Kung Fu. I'm like,
Right.
okay, that's interesting. I've always, I grew up in a Chinese household where we watched like these. I don't know if you've watched these like martial arts movies that are like extremely over the top.
Course.
It's like people flying in the forest and stuff. Like think about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that kind
Right.
of thing. It's like
Right.
okay. So I grew up watching Chinese kung fu movies. Um, it was like a part of our culture. So I was like, you know what? Let me go learn kung fu. Yeah, all right. So I signed up for that, and then it was a French guy teaching it. It was like I thought it was like this, long bearded Fu Manchu kind of like Chinese guy teaching it. Like, no, it was like this young, like 29-year-old, really fit French dude. And
Uh-huh.
then his story was he went to Malaysia to learn with some monks. Um, there's like the northern school of Shaolin, which is like a little more like footwork, and then the southern school, which is what he was training. That it's more like it's more closer to Muay Thai, more like hand stuff. But anyway, so he went to Malaysia to train, and then he came to Montreal, and now he's just like teaching part time for fun. He has another day job. Anyway,
Mhm.
I had a lot of fun. I did that all throughout college, 4 years. It wasn't like I was never super advanced. Like I could have trained more, but I was busy student,
Sure.
so I just didn't like. My coach would tell me, get up early in the morning, go slap some bag. It'll make you
Yeah.
strong. And like I did that for like 3 days. I just didn't have the discipline at the time to
Right.
keep it up. But it was really good for core training. It
Mhm.
was really good for like balance. Um, it, they like the first couple weeks was just conditioning. They don't actually teach you how to punch or kick until like a month in.
Hmm.
I remember, and that was very different from like my Muay Thai classes, where it's like class one, it's like all right, run around in a circle, everybody do punches. But here it's like in drills. Here it's like okay, so we really want you to condition your body before you do anything. So a lot of people left because they were expecting to be like Jackie Chan by month three, but
Right.
they were doing nothing but push-ups and sit-ups and like suicides for like a month and a half.
Hmm.
And then like some basic like core stuff, stuff you would never use in a fight. Like you would stand in like a horse stance, and they would just make you stand there for like 5 minutes, and then they'll make you do like long punches, like lunging or holding, just stuff you would never actually use in a fight, but
Right.
just to like train your body and
Right.
condition your body. So people thought it was impractical, and then they just left. It's like I wanted to learn how to fight, not like do like advanced yoga, that kind of thing. But I stuck it through, and then eventually, we call him the sensei, the master. He would be like, okay, well, you guys are like good enough. Now we're gonna do like more advanced stuff, and then he starts to actually teach you how to fight and some techniques. And then we have these like Friday sessions, I remember, where it's like it's not an official class, but we just go in there and like we just kind of do some loose sparring. And then there's this really cool thing that they do in that particular style of kung fu where it's called pushing hands.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like wrestling, but it's not really, where you're just like you're with a partner. There's no punching or kicking involved. And you're just the goal is to destabilize your
Sure.
partner, and push him on the ground, without a lot of excessive force. And the idea is just to feel the motion, feel your partner, and kind of use his force against himself. That was a lot of fun. That really set me up for basically. I believe that could set you up for basically anything else you want to do, because
Sure.
you already have like a good understanding of balance and movement, and then from there you can learn like techniques from other schools. So it was an easy transition into Muay Thai because I already had a kickboxing background. And then I remember I walked into a Muay Thai class, and then the guy was like, "All right, what's your deal? Why are you here?" I was like, "Oh, why?" I told him I did kickboxing, I did
Uh-huh.
kung fu, and then he was like, "All right, show me what you got." Shadow box for 30 seconds. So I did my thing, and then he just kind of looked at me. He's like, all right, just stop. I want you to I want you to go to that corner. I want you for the next 15 minutes just do jabs, like just one jab at a time. I
Yeah.
don't want to see like your form's all wrong, everything's just messed up. Like we're gonna start you from scratch. I thought I was good, apparently not. So definitely, if nothing else, martial arts teaches you humility.
Abs- Absolutely. That's hilarious.
Yeah, and then I did that for a couple of years, and it was funny because this was an interesting class experience because it was taught in French because we were in Montreal. My French was not great, so I didn't really understand everything he was saying, but you just kind of follow along what he was doing, and then it was a very different class dynamic. We would do conditioning for maybe 10 minutes, and then we would get into like he would teach us some techniques, and then for the second half of the class we would just spar with other people and actually get some practice in. So I've always thought Muay Thai was the most practical form I've ever
Mhm.
learned. I
Yeah.
never studied groundwork, but yeah, I loved Muay Thai. And then I stopped because I hurt my ankle, but wish I got back into it. Has it prepared me for my current career? No, but it's taught me that however good you think you are at something, there's always somebody bigger and stronger. I think
Absolutely.
that's a life lesson that you could carry for anything that you do.
Absolutely. Did you spar or were you just, working on drilling and techniques?
I did some sparring. I was in the ring a couple times. Like I never did tournaments or anything, but I was in the ring a couple times. We had to wear headgear and stuff.
Yeah. Well, you should get back into it, man. I mean, I could obviously tell the passion coming through in your voice when you're talking
Yeah,
about it.
I love it. I haven't yeah, I should probably I should find a gym. Yeah.
Yeah, find a
Yeah.
gym and get back into it. I mean, I absolutely love it. I mean, much like you, I'm swamped. I've got a
Right.
business to run. I've got two
Right.
small kids in the house, and time is a valuable resource that I just don't have enough of. But
Mm-hmm.
I make it a point to at least once a week, maybe twice a week, go to the gym and just move around with somebody. And then the other days a week, I'm just kind of lifting or doing whatever I can to not get fat, right? But that 1 or 2 days in the week just gives me so much joy just going and doing something that I love. And then for me, it does, I don't know why. I really don't because I played competitive basketball and soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but maybe it was the age that I started martial arts. But to me, I always thought that I was extremely athletic and I can go into martial arts
Mm-hmm.
and I can just do extremely well right from the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And much like your master kind of taught you is just teaching me how to jab for 3 weeks and how to slip a punch and then how to kind of move your body. And it really showed me, the foundational importance of anything, not only martial arts, but investing
Yeah.
or whatever it may be. So the discipline really transpired, and it was right around the same time that I started my business. I kind of went the same path you did, where I was working for a big company. I was getting a nice base salary and then a little
Yeah.
bit of override. But going out on your own, I needed that discipline to ensure that the business would get off on the right foot. And so I always tell my audience, if
Hmm.
you are kind of in a lackadaisical part of your life, or if you need some sort of motivation, martial arts, and it doesn't necessarily have to be kickboxing or Muay Thai, although that's my main passion, but
Hmm.
even just jujitsu, if you're fearful of the brain trauma, just
Yeah.
getting manhandled or getting your ass kicked, if you will teach you more about life than anything else, I believe.
How did you feel when you got punched in the face for the first time?
It was rough. Well, I had an older brother, and so we got
Okay,
into a
never
lot of
mind.
fights. It wasn't the first time. It was the first time that I kind of was expecting to be punched. But it's
Right.
different, you know, getting punched by, 14-ounce gloves by a
Yeah.
trained, maybe an amateur fighter.
Hmm.
It is alarming, and it really wakes you up, and it's scary. Your initial inkling is to shy away and to turn your back, but after a while you realize you need to, try to keep your eyes open while the punches come to you and try to slip them, and then after you go for a few more months, then you get more comfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm just a huge fan of it, hence why my podcast is called Fighting in Finance, just because
Right.
those are my main passions, if you will.
So I don't mean to be asking the questions. I'm just
No
really
problem.
interested in hearing about your background as well. But like when you first started learning how to fight, you said you were already in your 30s, right?
Yeah.
Um, did your first few classes kind of change your perspective on what you thought fighting could be? Like you kind of maybe went in with a notion of what it would be like, and then I'm already athletic. I could probably beat somebody up. I don't know if you thought that, and then
Yeah.
it was a different experience for you. Was
Oh, yeah, 100%. I was always the fastest, and I could kinda
Yeah,
jump high, and I had kind of those quick twitch muscles.
right.
I was never really strong, but I just had that type of athleticism,
Okay.
and I figured going into, my first kind of sparring session, if you will, that I would be able to outclass just with my speed, but to realize it has really nothing to do with that. It's mostly technique,
Mhm.
and, yeah, it was it was a valuable lesson that I needed to be taught, and I was very surprised at what, true fighting is. Yeah, I mean, long answer short, yes, I was very surprised.
Did it change your self-confidence in any way after
Yes,
training for a while?
it did, and this kinda goes back to the older brother. I had an older brother. We still love each other. We're great. We have a great
Mhm,
relationship, but we fought. We fought a lot. We were just 2 boys in a household,
mhm,
and we would also get into a lot of like street skirmishes, if you will. Never like
mm,
anything major, but growing up in
mhm,
LA, we got into a lot of fights, and
mhm,
those type of fights would end up, being on the ground, and the teachers would come break them up. They weren't
mhm,
really fights, they were just
mhm,
skirmishes. And so yeah, I was very surprised, and it did provide a lot of confidence in a certain way. What I mean by that is, now if a skirmish breaks out, I have so much confidence to be able to walk away. Whereas when I was younger, my fear was kind of took a back seat to a fake confidence that I had to portray, and I fought. And it was
mm,
kind of an ego type thing. Whereas
mhm,
now, no matter what the situation is, no matter if I can beat the person up 10 out of 10 times, it's just not worth it to me to ever
mhm,
get into a fight. That I think that kind of goes
mhm,
back to my instructor, who was it was very much about respect. You step on the mat, you bow. You
mhm,
never have your shoes on the mat. You always clean up the gym after yourself. And so the discipline and the respect aspect of martial arts was something that other sports never taught me.
mhm.
So yes, it did help with confidence, but I think it's a different type of confidence that it gave me.
It's I think it was a quote from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, like the the most impressive thing you can do is fight without having to fight. Let me just pull up his exact quote. Yeah. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. If you
Mm.
know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself and not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. I think that, yeah, I mean, it speaks to what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. If you, there comes a point where you no longer need to, I guess, prove yourself in a physical fight.
Hmm.
It's more impressive to de-escalate a situation with words. I find.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just, having trained now for 6 years with some of the top fighters in the world. I mean, I go to the gym with, a Justin Gaethje, Corey
Mhm.
Sandhagen, Neil Magny, Kamaru Usman. These are, top 1/10 of 1% of fighters in the world. And training alongside them, seeing the way that they handle their profession, it's just taught me that although I could probably beat up most people my size or smaller than me, there's really no need to. That gives me a certain level of confidence just walking into a room that I never had before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Probably even like you could probably even beat up people bigger than you too, because that's what technique trains you is to, use your opponents unless they like a sumo wrestler, you're just
right.
like splattered on the ground, then you can't do anything. Actually, it
Yeah.
was I was watching or I read a Bruce Lee interview a lot from he did a long time ago, and then he was like he was sparring with somebody, and then the guy had him in a choke lock on the ground,
Hmm.
and then Bruce Lee tapped out. And the guy was like, "All right, well, this was like a not a real fight, but if this were like a real fight, like what would you do? You're pinned to the ground." He said, "Well, that's easy. I would bite you."
Yeah. Exactly. The street fights are much different than fighting in the gym. If it's in a street fight, I will do whatever it takes to win by all means. Scratch,
Yeah.
claw, bite, hit you in the nuts, whatever it takes.
I really liked watching or listening to Bruce Lee interviews from when he was doing interviews, and he was like, I don't know if you know that, but you probably do, but he was
Yeah.
a philosophy student,
Yep.
so a lot of his stuff was very philosophical, and I think his philosophy on fighting changed over time as well. Like one of the um, most interesting changes that I remember was that he initially thought that a bigger muscle is a better muscle, and he
Hmm.
later in his life he retracted that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it comes from his own training philosophy, and that yeah, the example of biting his opponent, his philosophy was that your whole body is a weapon. You can use whatever you want, and you should. And you shouldn't be confined to a certain form or a style, or you should only do this in certain situations. Like no, like when the time comes, I'm gonna bite your ass.
Yeah.
Like that's like
Be like water, he says. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. I love that. Well, that's it's really nice to hear you talk about martial arts. I always envision you as the finance guy, but it's nice to see this side of you. But if you don't mind, I want to go back to the finance side.
for sure.
From your perspective, you sit down with some of the top investors and asset managers and minds of philosophy. What is your investment approach? And do you manage your own investments or do you rely on professionals to handle your money?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll fully disclose that right now. I own $0 in the public markets. I mean, I used to do some trading on
Hmm.
my own. I used to have a mutual fund that maturity came and I liquidated that. They actually did pretty well.
Hmm.
But currently, no, I don't own anything in any markets, and the reason is I have my own business, and so every spare dollar that I have that's not used for personal consumption is used to reinvest back into my own business because I realize better returns
Of
when I do
course.
that. So I think there will come a point where I can allocate some money into just investing and basically diversifying my income streams from my business to other people's businesses. But I think it's going to be a while before I invest in stocks, which is other people's businesses,
Hmm.
for the simple reason that I want to maximize return on my own business. Would I hire someone to manage my own money? Uh, Probably, probably. I mean, what I've learned from talking to a lot of people is that even though I have a finance background, I studied finance, I did macro research for 5 years. These guys are all much, much, much smarter than me when it comes to investing. And why would I invest myself when I could ask any one of my guests or some of my guests to do it for me, right?
Right.
They'd probably do a better job. So I think there is value in active management. yes, I understand the stats,
Hmm.
especially in the mutual fund industry. Most mutual funds lose money.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily just that the fund managers are bad. It's just the way that it's structured, it loses money. Um, Hedge funds as well. Not everyone does better, but at the end of the day, could I do better? I mean, that's the question I have to ask myself. Could I
Right.
do better? I don't have a track record of beating the markets, so I can't definitively answer you. Yes, I'm going to do better. Like I just don't know. Why would I take on that risk? I would rather investing is never going to be my primary business. It
Hmm.
won't be. It'll be managing a media business among some other things that I plan to
Hmm.
do, but I don't see myself ever managing my portfolio as well as some other people.
Hmm. I love that. Well, I appreciate the transparency, and I do believe active investing has a place. Especially when you take into consideration the taxes, the fees associated with a lot of these mutual funds. My thought process, and I'll be fully transparent, much like you, and I manage close to $500 million myself, with long-term retirement accounts.
Hmm.
I firmly believe in just direct indexing. Don't try to time the market. Continue to contribute to them, and that's been my philosophy, and that hasn't changed for 20 years.
Hmm.
With non-qualified assets or after-tax dollars, if you will, I do believe in direct indexing and tax loss harvesting. I think those are the major components that the traditional DIY investor cannot compete with professional fund managers on. What I
Hmm.
do not like is these kind of get, and I don't think you probably can agree and attest to this, these get rich quick, these hedge funds that promise these outrageous type of returns. And I have clients reach out to me and say, I heard this real estate portfolio is doing 30% a year. What are your thoughts? And I immediately just bat them down because I think if it sounds too good to be true, it likely is. But I do, going back to the active management, I think there is a place for that, especially in non-qualified accounts. So we do have very similar investment philosophies.
I'm just curious what real estate funds are doing 30%
Yeah,
a year right now. Which
yeah, it's
which areas are you investing in?
it was this is just recent because my client called me about a week ago, so it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
He sent me this mom and pop real estate investment based out of Mexico, and
Mm,
there were so many red flags. But my client is a very successful surgeon. He's a very intelligent person, and so for
hmm.
him to even consider investing in a fund like this goes to show that there are a lot of money put money into funds just because they've got either great marketing or great sales tactics. Um, but yeah, I immediately bat that down. But the thing is, especially in the social media world and TikTok and Instagram and all these personalities that talk about real estate and stock trading, I just want to point out to our audience that there is no such thing as a get rich quick scheme or a type of investing, that you have to either outsource to professional money managers and have a long-term time horizon, or if you want to do it yourself, don't try to time the market. Time in the markets will
Hmm.
beat timing the markets. So that's just what I wanted to point out.
I think it varies depending on your risk tolerance. So, um, are there ways to get rich quick? Sure. Uh, you have to be aware that the same assets that can make you rich very quickly could also make you poor very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just a matter of whether or not you're willing to take that risk. And the way you define risk is very differs person to person. I just had a call with Kenneth French, who is a very well-known economist, well known for his work on asset pricing. He worked on asset pricing models with Eugene Fama, who won the Nobel Prize. I also have Fama on the show, on my show rather. But anyway, I asked Kenneth French in our pre-interview call what he would like to talk about, and he said, "Well, I like to talk about a lot of things. One of which is defining risk, and his definition of risk is simply." Um, I wrote it down, so I don't want to misquote him. Yeah, his
Mhm.
definition is uncertainty about lifetime consumption. Because he says, why do we invest? We invest so we can have money in the future for personal consumption.
Mm.
And the level of risk comes from the fact that we don't know how much money we'll have in the future for this purpose.
Mm.
Um, it's a pretty simple way to look at it, but not a lot of people explains it or explain it so simply and eloquently. Investing is simply a way for you to plan for your future, and the level of risk you take will determine the level of certainty you have about your future. So if I put my money in a treasury account or buy CDs and I can get 4 or 5% right now, I know definitively that I'll have a 4 to 5% return
Sure.
in the next 1 year. Um, my level of risk tolerance is very low. My level of certainty is very high, but I also won't get extraordinarily rich off 4 or 5% unless I'm parking in $1 billion.
Hmm.
Um, if I were to buy Shiba Inu coin, if I were to park in $10,000, I have to be prepared for the fact that I may never see those $10,000 again. But I could also be a millionaire by next week.
Sure.
Um, so my level of certainty as to whether or not I'll be very rich or very poor is high, but you know, with higher risk comes higher return. I think that's one of the basic tenets of finance that we have to clarify because yes, you're right that uh, not you were talking about how your clients come to you with an offer of 30% return on real estate. I'm saying it's possible. I'm saying that's not impossible.
Hmm.
But what is the level of risk involved in that particular investment opportunity? That's something that has to be factored into every decision.
I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Um, last question for you, David, and I appreciate your time. I really do. It's been an
No
honor to
problem.
have you on. You mentioned, your media company, and I hope my audience all follow you on your YouTube channel.
Thank you.
What are your plans over the next, let's call it, short term, 1, 2, 3 years
Hmm.
with this channel? And what are your long-term plans or long-term plans with the channel?
Well, next 2 3 years, um, yeah, short-term plans, expanding the channel.
Hmm.
So by expansion, I mean more content, more diversity of content. So different areas of finance. Uh, I'm going to be going into science and tech a bit more. So I'm already starting to do a bit of that content now, but my audience isn't really there for that yet. So it'll
Hmm.
take some time to build. But I do want to have sub channels as well, multiple channels for different things. I do want to eventually also bring on other hosts, so I'm not the only face of the company. I'll rebrand it. Currently, it's called the David Lin Report. I'll call it something else by that point. I
Hmm.
don't know what yet.
Hmm.
So I do want it to be a network of different content verticals and different sub channels with different hosts, all within, I guess, the under the umbrella of finance and business and how to make money and understanding. I would say understanding the economy in the world would be the main central theme of whatever
Hmm.
it is that I do. Longer term, I want to expand my ventures into financial products and services as well.
Okay.
Not necessarily managing money, but things like databases or analytics tools that my audience could also find helpful. So think there's some ideas I'm working on that I want to launch the next couple of years. But I do want to make my company more of a tech company with media as being one division, and then the other divisions just sort of products or services um, or like databases that people can use.
Got it. Got it. Love it. Well, I wish you nothing but success, and I'm very confident that you will achieve all of your goals. It's been
Thank
an
you.
honor having you on,
It's an
and
honor to be here. Thank you.
thank you so much.